Hello, everyone. My name is H. Melt. I'm the poetry coordinator at Women and Children First Bookstore in Chicago. And I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight on Kemi Alabi Day to celebrate Against Heaven with Aricka Foreman, Benji Hart, and E. Hughes. Before that, though, I would like to acknowledge the land on which Women and Children First sits is the occupied territory of the Peoria, Potawatomi, and Miami people. There are over 75,000 Indigenous people of many nations living in Illinois, and we encourage you to research whose land you're on in your own homes and communities and connect with local Indigenous-led organizations. Women and Children First is currently open to the public for in-store shopping with masks required. We are also processing online orders every day, have curbside pickup, and ship books across the country. I would like everyone to know that tomorrow, Wednesday, April 6th at 5 p.m., Kemi will be in store signing and personalizing copies of the book. So if you order the book online from womenandchildrenfirst.com, you can feel free to either show up if you're local tomorrow at 5 p.m. to say hi to Kemi, get your book signed, or to just leave an in-order comment when you order, and we will get that signed and shipped out to you this week. So tonight we're going to have some reading, conversation between our authors, and then there will be a Q&A at the end. Also, just so everyone knows, this event is being recorded. It will be immediately uploaded at the same link afterwards to rewatch. And we will also upload to the Women and Children First YouTube page with captions. So a little bit about the book, and then I'll read everyone's bios, and we will get into our first reader. Kemi Alabi's Against Heaven is somewhere between Chicago and home. They write, heaven and hell are the same empire, and ask, is there a state in between? They urge us to warm our hands near the raging fire, find our own coven, and bless the houses that love builds. Against Heaven is full of sky, defiant of the choir, and a gospel all its own. First up tonight, we will have Aricka Foreman, who is an American poet and interdisciplinary writer from Detroit, author of the chapbook Dream with a Glass Chamber and Salt Body Shimmer. She has earned fellowships from Cave Canem, Callaloo, and the Millay Colony for the Arts. She serves on the board of directors for the Offing and spends her time in Chicago, engaging poetry with photography and video. E. Hughes received her MFA and MA from the Litowitz Creative Writing Program at Northwestern University. Her poems have been published or are forthcoming in Guernica, Poet Lore, The Offing, Chicago Quarterly Review, and other places. She has been a finalist for the 2021 Eleanor Benedict Poetry Prize and longlisted for the Canem Fellowship Prize. She was nominated for a Pushcart and Best of the Net Award. Hughes has been a participant in the Tin House Summer and Winter Workshops, the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation Workshop, and the Palm Beach Poetry Festival. Her first manuscript of poems is titled Black Women Standing Ankle Deep in Pacific Water. Benji Hart is a Chicago-based author, artist, and educator whose work centers Black radicalism, queer liberation, and prison abolition. Their words have appeared in numerous anthologies and been published at Teen Vogue, Time, The Advocate, and elsewhere. They've led workshops and facilitated convenings for groups like Law for Black Lives, National Bailout, and Project NIA. Their performances have been featured locally and internationally at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, the Museo del Chopo in Mexico City, and the Amsterdam University of the Arts. They have been a fellow with the Rauschenberg Foundation, MacDowell, and are a 3 Arts awardee in the teaching arts. And lastly, Kemi Alabi is the author of Against Heaven, selected by Claudia Rankine as winner of the 2021 Academy of American Poets First Book Award. Their poems and essays appear in The Atlantic, Poetry, Boston Review, Catapult, Them, the BreakBeat Poets Volume 2, Best New Poets 2019, and elsewhere. Selected by Chen Chen as winner of the 2020 Beacon Street Poetry Prize, Kemi has received Pushcart Prize, Best of the Net, and Brittle Paper Award nominations, along with support from MacDowell, Civitella Ranieri, Tin House, and Pink Door. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Aricka. Thanks, y'all.
Hey, y'all. So we are here in celebration of Kemi Alabi's incredible debut collection, Against Heaven. If you haven't gotten it yet, please do. If you're thinking about it, I don't know why you're still thinking. This is an emerging poet who has so much depth of interior knowing, and also not afraid to undo, unlearn, and look. And so it's really a pleasure and a treat to be a part of this dialogue. And I thank you, Kemi, for asking me to be a part of the celebration for this new book. The advanced copy I've been keeping very away from the thing, so there's not even coffee stains. There's not even baking stains, because I'm like, no, this is sacred. This is sacred. And speaking of the sacred, it's very much in terms of prayer, looking for prayer in everyday spaces, and looking for the ways of ritual in which we salt certain ideas, in which we salt certain and dead them, certain misconceptions. And so it's a constant cycle of living, which I appreciate. So I'm just going to read 3 poems. I provided 4 because I can never decide what to read in these spaces, because I just want to be in conversation as best as I can be, as close as I can be. But the first one that I'm going to start with is called Mary Woodson Sets the Grit Straight. And for the uninitiated, Mary Grits was the lover of Al Green, Al Grits Green, Grits Diaspora War, enough said. So anyway, I'm going to read the poem. Mary Woodson Sets the Grit Straight. They remember the clumped hot grain, burning breakdowns into his back, his comeback to God. 3rd degree salvation. Through word of mouth, I'm his wife, girlfriend, lover, who gets it right. The pistols click down till the hole blew open, a way to say, no, not today. You crazy for that one, Mary. Which door we enter through? Museum of dollar store dames, thrift fur, and wrong diagnoses. Light wanderers through wrought iron gates. Who needs who when legends need a fix? Forget us until we're dead, revised, inaccurate, if written at all. Paranoid peony, pen us songs to sit us upright. Make me happy, baby. Weave your cry down in your bones. Let me sing, baby, crazy. I can't leave your love alone, crazy. Which door through? Archway, wrought iron gate, nails bruised at the beds, scarlet and slick. Was I scratching my way to the beginning? Not his heard the green burns, click down of the pistol's clamor. They say he wanted me to be his knife, his world friend, a hole enough to let the static out. We rarely strut through the front dower. Often men believe we have the keys to unlocking every ghost they can't bear to face. Humorism is a strange to me, sort of confluence of language and medical answer to the ills of the world and their impact while not acknowledging the world. Anyway, this poem is called Humorism, but it's definitely based off of the English quadrant of like the four humors and how they are supposed to interact in that space. Humorism. Night alone in the beautiful borrowed house, I vow never to watch another horror film where the woman squeaks a dish clean, sings braless between Joplin's threshold throat. Please, Lord, work not to leave her down here in it. She's a bow on a handsaw, thin and tinned, her water on metal, cutting through birch limbs, drop appendages of pine cones, mimic ghost fist on a dinner table. The driver says, "What a perfect place to be murdered," and laughs. Outside, the deep-seated sea skirts its fog hem. Just beyond the dim glow of porch light, I am always almost afraid. Little humor in the tea leaves, almost always a body of little lemon pills to sleep or swim in it. Suck the songs back when Sandra and Renisha and Corinne sleep comes and goes, does good, or the fitful dreams scatter like black mollusks along a Massachusetts shore. The whole keeps our music all horsehair pulled taut on the wind bow bend with teeth. It's cool. Keep it. Rinse the silver pans until they creak and moan. Wipe the counter smooth. Tuck in. Keep a nightstand light on. Be a mother figure with a maldescent faucet to drink from. Be the bridge wrought breakable, no discernible beam left. Click down, switch, quick, back. Don't say her, say her name. A wish that maybe you'll say mine. Inferred punchline, breakbone, broke. Say it, I dare you. And then I'm going to leave a last poem. I just have to choose which one of these that I'm gonna read because I could not. Yeah, no, I'm gonna do this. So there are some incredibly lovely poems in Kemi's book, and it's not to say that they're lovely, so they're soft, although softness and tenderness is a part of it. But it also invokes a kind of like history and lineage, warriage, archival sort of energy. And so a lot of that is found in found language when we can't have our archives mirrored in the ways that they should be because so much has been destroyed. But so I'm going to read this all found language poem after Ross Gay. But I'm so appreciative to Kemi being tapped into the ancestors, the ghosts, the future, who we do not know, who we are still named to. And so again, just really proud of this book and incredibly honored to be a part of its celebration. So before I ask her, the therapist asked, what is it like to be a Black woman here? A monologue after Ross Gay. I love your hair, You always wear such interesting things. What did you do before this? Wow, are you from Detroit? What is that like? Tell me what your thesis is about. That sounds really powerful. Your poem tonight was really intense. You'll appreciate this, since you're kind of ghetto. You worked so hard, you made it. So, what did you think about that Juno Diaz essay? I'm suspicious of poems within agenda that have a certain aboutness. Explain what you mean when you say risk. I'm really uncomfortable. I went to Detroit, well, Dearborn, and it's amazing how cheap the houses are. No, it's really a cool town. Are you a Tigers fan? That city is having a really hard time for sure. I lived there once when I worked for Teach for America. How do you feel about people who claim Detroit but aren't really from there? I really love your hair. Is your work always so intense? That line is a little melodramatic. I'm not as smart as you, but I thought rape was about sex. What do you mean it's hard to date? I mean, you are here. Rap, it's not about music. Let's make it not about race. Oh, come on. I only call people I love my name. I don't mean this to sound racist. You don't seem like you date white guys. I love how our skin looks when I hold your hand. I like women who live a natural lifestyle. You're so well spoken. Wow. You've really read a lot. Ithaca must be way different than what you're used to. You can breathe now. You made it. Without further ado.
I'm very happy to be here. Kemi, this is an amazing collection of poems. And yeah, I just am very thankful to be here celebrating. I am going to start us off with some line from Kemi's poem from the collection, Black As. I think tonight I'm going to try to be in conversation with these words. Not all of us survived. Grief came home, back to our throats, our lungs. Grief been black, blue black. This is a poem titled I Know Love by the Morning. My mother in a robe already has the cordless pressed to her ear. We've never said good morning, only insisted light be let in through dusty blinds. She fixes the silk scarf wrapped around her head. The edges of her graying hair behave like children refusing sleep. My mother has this old habit of ignoring me, though she wouldn't call it that. She would say, "You are my child who always lands on her feet. You don't need or want for anything." The first time I held a woman, I thought I would die from the fullness. The ache of hunger so mundane to me, her body became an unappreciated miracle. I have made a habit of loving women for something other than what they are, burdening their flesh with the wholeness of my need. I need a way out of this regret. I need a way out of this child's desire for her mother. My mother now has hung up the phone. At the stove, she fries bacon and stirs a small pot of grits. Before she adds the cheese, she puts a bit in her mouth. She has prepared a meal enough for herself. I know love by this direction. You must make your own. This is a poem titled, I Call Distraction a Bird, for M. And by bird, perhaps I mean the way freckles move across the span of your body as if it were a sky or a toss like seeds sown across a damp landscape by an impartial God. As we lie here, I do not want to think about a man, but about entering, filling the rich space between soul and body. Tonight you have touched me like a woman standing before a crowd plays a guitar, plucking the strings of me with your eyes closed, the timbre of my body brought close to your chin until I gave you what you wanted, the dissonant groan, my wailing. I want to call what you make of me a bird, a litany, or to be as sure as Adam had to have been when he fixed his tongue to name a thing. I do not want to name the shapes we make with his flawed language, to name what we are, woe to man. In this quiet, I call us firmament. I call us the veil. I call the unspeakable darkness God, torn until we stand in a shimmer of painful light. This is what we are becoming: flight, the feather, the wing, the bird in the morning as it sings. This next poem is titled Ars Poetica, or Love. When I was a child, I wanted to be known the way I had seen it on TV. A mother slowly rubs the brow of her eldest, says sweetheart before she gives her child a lesson on being alive. I've never been alive in that way. Gentle touch more like a myth than a demonstration of affection. In a bed with a woman once, I tried to touch her with the gentleness I knew. Touch her the way on a hillside, grass right before the turn towards summer. Wisp at my bare ankles, the way in early spring a cardinal leaps to each bare branch of a cottonwood tree, collecting all it needs for the foundation of its nest. The way my mother at last held me and said she loved me for the first time, I remembered. In a bed with a woman once, she moved her hand from my tenderness to the base of my neck, then clenched. And I wondered what I did to deserve it. I wanted to be known the way I had heard others describe it. She lapped until I became. She held me before the eruption. She spoke every tender word she could before she shrieked my name. Sorry. This next poem is titled, I Left My Heart in the Fragrance. Of those roses I sent you, I imagined them on your table in the same dim lighting you kissed me in for the first time. Marvin Gaye blaring in the background, wailing about losing his woman, and you leaning in to cup my face. I kept my eyes open. You were that stunning. By then, I had already lost so much. Why miss the sun flaring its axiomatic brilliance toward us, highlighting the amber in your hair? When I held you, I was flame. Once I looked into those eyes, I had to face myself, face the history of each terrifying moment I had not survived. I would not survive. The way you were to exit the sky of my life would cause each lonely wound in the firmament to collide, make the day a perpetual night, make me more ruined than person. I have lost everything I loved before I knew I had it. My mother and her sustenance clipped too soon from the umbilical cord. Nana's U-shaped eyes, the way she shouted, I love you, when she knew I wasn't going to make it home before she died. My sister's leaving, her arms wrapped around my neck, her soft whispers in my ears, boo-boo, be good for mommy. When I held you, I was determined not to lose again. This was my first mistake. You were the rain I tried to collect without a bucket, the moon eclipsing the sun, a shadow cast I was never able to capture. Only a few more depressing poems, y'all, to go. This poem is titled Icarus. I don't want everyone to die on this plane, just me, in the membrane of air, wanting to be taken by the masculinity of gravity. I want it to end here, before the poem becomes about a woman I held once, the way she lives like moss on the bark of my heart, before the poem becomes about loss, and I admit love is the thing that's always leaving. Once a leaf seemed suspended as it floated past my window. I want to be that graceful in descent, in violent surrendering to grief. And just 2 more short poems. In the darkest places, and this has an epigraph from Lucille Clifton. Kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain it will love your back. I still love someone. The days don't change, nor does my desire to step backward into the abyss of this past. Hold her hand a little longer. Make my face mean what my words could not. I love you the only way I know how, in the darkest places. I love you like a mother on the verge of losing her will to live. I love you the way this metaphor has already failed. You sank into me as the sun sinks into the black horizon, and now I can't let go. And this last one I'm going to finish is titled Dyke Behavior. I know what I am. My auntie's greatest fear, my mother's shame. When I love another, I put a dick between my legs, let her call me daddy until sex drives us into oblivion, confusion. Once I wanted to be a woman. Once I wanted to be accepted, but I have learned to love the silicon situation that is me. I've let go of these dreams that were never mine, but an ideal, a symbolic order of belonging. I call my failure a corpse, a corpsing. I am corpsed until I learn death isn't even an exit. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here. So grateful to be sharing some of my words alongside these incredible poets and these incredible words of others. I just really cannot express how incredibly grateful I am to be here, especially on such a momentous day and celebrating such an important achievement for Kemi. Kemi is just one of the most generous authors, generous artists that I've ever known. And so much of my work, so much of my writing specifically would not be possible without Kemi. And so it is such an honor to be here supporting them, because I feel like I've received so much support from them that who I am and the work that I do would not be possible without. So I'm so grateful to Kemi and so grateful to be here. I'm going to read 3 poems if there's time. The first poem is called 45 Questions to Ask While Waiting. And Kemi cited it in their poem 44 Questions to Ask While Binging. So I wanted to start with that as a little shout out. 45 Questions to Ask While Waiting. 1. Which part of your body aches most by evening? 2. Where is the least visited corner in your home? 3. When was the last time you cried over something that later seemed silly? 4. When piling things on the floor, how do you arrange the piles? 5. What is the cruelest thing you have done in love? 6. If you could punch one person in the face, who would it be? 7. What is the most mundane hurt you are carrying? 8. What fantasy do you revisit on your morning commute? 9. What will cause your inevitable downfall? 10. How many headaches have you had in the last week? 11. Are you most yourself when alone or with others? 12. What is the worst thing that has not yet happened? 13. Which chore do you put off most consistently? 14. How good have you become at lying? 15. What is the most expensive thing you own and never use? 16. How many houseplants have you killed? Round up. 17. What shame have you learned to live with? 18. What is the oldest thing currently in your refrigerator? 19. Who got away without taking responsibility for what they did? 20. What hypocrisy in yourself have you yet to amend? 21. When sleep deprived, what is the most likely reason? 22. With whom is your kindness most forced? 23. Which two dire needs are you presently choosing between? 24. Can you name a time you were least proud of yourself? 25. Does odor or height determine whether the trash should be taken out? 26. For you, what does chronic pain refer to? 27. Whose misery would bring you comfort? 28. With whom are you dreading having a conversation? 29. How long should a burnt pot soak before being washed? 30. What permission have you given yourself to retaliate? 31. What is the name of the missing thing? 32. If you stopped, what would suddenly come into sharp focus? 33. Which question do you wish someone would ask you? 34. What terrible truth could everyone find out? 35. How have you convinced yourself that tenderness is scarce? 36. Which aspect of your character makes you difficult to live with? 37. What gut reaction are you purposefully ignoring? 38. Do you wait by the stove for the water to boil or leave the room? 39. With what have you replaced the things you owe yourself? 40. How many days has it been since you changed the bedclothes? 41. What consumes the majority of your emotional stores? 42. Whom are you waiting to acknowledge as fallible? 43. What book did you skim that you told everyone you read? 44. Which place in yourself is still secretly reeling? 45. What have you imagined is coming to heal you? This next poem, which was also integrally supported by Kemi, is called Laylene's Bill with Revisions. And it was written in honor of Laylene Cubile Polanco Extravaganza, who was a Black, disabled, trans woman who died in solitary confinement at Rikers Island. And New York City Council passed this or wrote this package of legislation in her name. And this poem is a rejection and a revising of that legislation. Laylene's Bill with Revisions. The New York City Council will pass a package of legislation expanding services for transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and intersex inmates. Scratch that. Will turn out its pockets. Never sign another ransom note. All officers with trans inmates in their custody will undergo a competency training. Scratch that. Will have their badge numbers etched off with diamond-tipped acrylics, aquamarine. New beds will be added to the transgender housing unit. Scratch that. Beds of wildflowers will erupt from lots that were not vacant, just holding their breath. Counselors will be made available to all trans inmates. Scratch that. We are each our sister's counsel. The Board of Correction will convene a task force. Scratch that. Will be tasked with something useful, like beekeeping or collecting rainwater. Sex workers will have their cases diverted to human sex trafficking intervention court. Scratch that. We'll spray paint the words, "We are the intervention," on the courthouse rubble. The Rikers Island compound will be replaced by a series of smaller borough-based facilities. Scratch that. We'll slip into the rising Atlantic. the ribs of our dead, prepared to cage it. Trans elders will be held in solitary confinement for their own safety. Scratch that. Will have their charcoal locks retwisted in chosen hands. This legislation will take effect in the summer of 2020. Scratch that. We have never asked permission to sing. And the last poem that I'm going to read comes from a performance that I've been working on over the last couple of years, looking at Vogue, bomba, and gospel music, all as examples of Black art forms that imagine Black liberation through the tools of empire. And this poem is called Homily. What does it mean for an enslaved people to adopt the symbology of their own enslavement as the primary metaphor for freedom? Old spiritual, soon I will be done with the troubles of the world, going home to live with God, where God is Jah, Jah, a shortening of Jehovah, which appears some 50 times in the Hebrew Bible, 24 of those within the larger utterance, Hallelujah. Slaves in colonial Jamaica made to study the Old Testament, reinterpret Exodus as the epic of their own exile, refer to the West as Babylon, the motherland, to which they believe they will one day return, Zion, not to be confused with Zionism and its innumerable logics of detention. Rikers Island, named in part for Richard Riker, 19th century lawyer who takes particular pleasure in returning Black Northerners to their former Southern owners. Incarcerated Queens Vogue, before the induction of the term Vogue, entertaining their fellows in bondage. How can we sing King Alpha's song in a strange land? Some of y'all might be familiar with the Melodians' 1970 rendition. It being impossible for niggas to have the intellectual dexterity to warp the concept of their own captivity in on itself. Well done, servant. That's what I want my Lord to say. Survival, while insufficient, is still an act of defiance. Few recall Jesus declaring, I came not to bring peace, but a sword. Crucifixion, after all, state-sanctioned violence, crucifixion, Rakia, Demo, Maya, Quintonio, Kiki, DeCynthia, Ronnie Man, Laylene, Charlena, D'Angelo, Betty, Kiwi, Ayana, Corin, Titi, Aricka. Each speaking of their names lays Pax Romana bare, insists the empire has no democracy to spread. Everybody talking about heaven ain't going there. The subtext being our captors are not bound for the milk and honey land of their own invention. Ponce, 1826, slaves plan armed insurrection under the pretense of a dance and drumming circle known as a bombazo. After the failed conspiracy, conspire literally meaning to breathe together. Gobernador Miguel de la Torre issues formal decree, increasing foreman oversight and restricting mobility. Think no-fly list, think no-fly zone, think one bright morning when this life is over, and haven't we always named liberation through the syllables of enslavement? Is Zion behind or ahead of us? To whom is the machete loyal? In that great getting up morning, where we finna fly to? Thank you all so much.
Hey everybody, in that great getting up morning, where are we finna fly to? Was that last line, Benji? I've read this poem so many times, but to hear you read it tonight, to hear all of these poets read their poems tonight, has been such a gift to me. Thank you all so much for being here to celebrate my debut collection, Against Heaven. This is so dreamy to be able to invite 3 poets who I love to this book launch hosted by Women and Children First, a bookstore that I love, that has been so generous with me, with poets. I think they're the best poetry section in the city. To have all of this Black queer excellence tonight, it's such a blessing. I was just trying to sit back and listen to y'all, but I had to change my set list a few times because you kept referencing poems that I wasn't going to read. And I'm like, I guess I got to do those poems. So I'm going to start with a poem that E referenced, Black As. And I'm glad it came up because the book really functions on its premise. It's a poem in 2 parts. The first part is the wound. The first part is the portal. Part of my hesitation around the first draft of Against Heaven was that it was more wound than portal. But as we all heard tonight, folks came with the heavy, and there's so much truth. There's a whole portal in those wounds. So I no longer have that fear, but I do hope that if you pick it up, you find that both wounds and portals are present. So this is Black As, and I wrote it at the beginning of this pandemic. It would have been beautiful to be in the same room as y'all tonight. I'm so grateful that virtual options are still around so that we can convene safely. This pandemic isn't over, but we can still gather. Black As. First, the wound. Not all of us survived. Grief came home, back to our throats, our lungs. Grief been black, blue-black, tires balled between work and home black, Monday through Sunday double shifts black. Asked about those visions, if spirits still slicked my mother's sleep, and she said she's too tired to dream, too tired to see nothing but black. Grief came home to our lead-thick water, our Big Mac breakfast greasing the way between work and home black. Begged her to take sick time, but not a day off in 10 years black. Said the place would fall apart without her, but not a raise in 10 years black. Needs the health insurance. Dad used 9 diapers all before noon. Don't make pill boxes big enough black. And the co-pays alone. Not all of us survive. Not all living is surviving. A virus can't take what they already stole, our land, our labor, our language, our magic, our minds, our time. But all my mother's mail tries to tell her what she owes. How much will her burial cost? Death, another debt black. Grief, a bill where the body was black. News, all markets and borders and shouts, and nothing we can live on. No news, still bad news black. Learned about the virus on the clock when the packages he shipped became essential. Learned about the virus when pastor got sick, though he was covered in the blood, though she made 3rd, 4th jobs of prayer. Learned about the virus when the cough came, when the clinic wouldn't answer the phone. Remembered what the ER cost last time, so I just stayed home. When even the stores in the white neighborhoods had nothing on the shelves. When the calls from the cousins up in county came, and even their pitch was a fever, black is a wound, yes, 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 and black is a portal. And even their pitch was a fever, became essential. Shouts we can live on. A bill the body owes for our magic. All living would fall apart without our black, greasing the way between home and home grief, our thick water spirit, Vision double. Shifts black. Mother blue. Back. Home. My mother calls heaven home. I love her faith. I love her faith. I grew up observing the way she prayed, the way she sang, the way she read her Bible. And when she talks about the troubles of this world, she finds relief in saying, I'm going home. One day I'll go home. So this is a poem for her. Voice clear as. When my mom discovers heaven's just a noise festival, the God choir of all her loves breathing, unsnagged by asthma or Newport dragged lung. The true song life makes, untethered from a body, tugged at last from the men who hold its reins. Will she blame her pastors, like I did, for Sunday portraits of pooled white gold? Will she miss the wooden flute of her body? Mourn the days corner-propped, cloaked in dust, too pious to disturb her room's skin cells and stray hair with her sound. Snapped awake at the nightmare of a slip fringe, the private note sung aloud. Or, unburdened by hell, will she exhale and hear the bells? When I think about one of the reasons I love Black queer community so much is because I just feel like we have everything we need. I wrote this poem with us as the we. It's called We Would Hex the President, but though I urge you to insert any leader that you'd like. I was in South Carolina a couple days ago and we hexed the governor almost. We would have hexed the governor, but so insert whoever you'd like. We would hex the president, but our bloom game too strong. Altar stays red candle cinnamon lit, sweet flicker cracking into prance. Stays portal door warmed ajar, spell flung darkward. Wood, but we so black, we lightless. No mirrors, so touch sound food, our cedar smoke drum kicks the body back to gospel. Drumsticks the body smacked in mouthfuls, the room perfumes with our funk bright wild wood, but our skin yams. Plush mothers cackling, juice dripping, and this just our first slow branch ascending. Wood, but neighbors to dine an unstranger, root bind into kin. A nation of misalphaed wolf carcass to climb through. Would hex their new head, that never man, rot reeking the soil. But who'd feed these seeds? That wet orange howl, just compost slime, returning. The sky glows red candle. Air soots and sludges darkward. Still, our funk bright wild, block by block, our tangling. We would hex the damned born dead, but billions still alive, cord and alive, threshed concave and still sweet flickers. Would, but who needs these feasts? I used to call myself a brain in a jar. I'm still that most days. So I like to return to this poem to remind me to be grounded in my own body and its power so that I can connect with all of you and all of my community and our power collectively. But that can only happen if we find deeper presence in ourselves. And my hope in writing this book was for me to journey towards my own presence in myself and moving away from forfeiting my power to whoever was designated to rule it for the day. And I hope that for readers, it's also an invitation to locate that power elsewhere as well. So this is a wedding, or what we unlearned from Descartes. Beloved, Last night I doused us in good bourbon, struck a match between our teeth, slid the lit head lip to chest, throat zippered open and spilling. Our union demands a sacrifice. Take my masks, my wretched, immaculate children, sharp smiles bored with cavities, braids thick with hair slashed off lovers as they slept. The masks grew limbs and danced, so last night to the fire, plank pushed, cackling as they bubbled and split, then dreamless dark, then mercy somehow morning reached for me. Sun found us swaddled in sweat through sheets, gauze and salve while night wore off. Oh body, always healing despite me. Oh body, twin spy, tasked against my plot to rush the dying. Guardian of the next world's sweets. Yes, I'll lick the salt. Yes, I'll wait our turn. Because today we hold hands, mother each other, bathe in warm coconut oil. Our union, our long baptism. Oh body, all I've forced you to know of thirst. Yes, body, you are owed a whole lake. Yes, body, I'll kiss our wrists, hold them to our ears, and spend our days losing to the waves. The last poem will be 2 poems. I can cheat because it's my book launch. It's going to be 2 against heavens. Some people ask me what I mean by against heaven. Do I mean opposing heaven? Do I mean alongside heaven? And the answer is yes. There are 5 title poems in this book, and all of them approach the idea of against heaven from different ways. Here's the first. It borrows lyrics from the rapper Saba, who says, "There's heaven all around me," and from Nick Hakim, who sings, "What if heaven's right here?" Against heaven. There's earth, amethyst, cherries in heat, trees drooling sugar, midnight's blue song. So what heaven? That kingdom hold by a coy god's touch, where green and the river began. If all Father tells it, first you slave and shiver and shuck and die, for heaven's a round back gate to budge loose at the bent speck of you. Lies, no doors, no lines. Look right. Me and mine kissed alive, greening. Curl up and chime against us. The river is born here. And the last against heaven in the book owes its life to a Tourmaline tweet during the uprisings in June 2020. Tourmaline tweeted, "When we say abolish police, we also mean the cop in your head and in your heart." Against heaven. I used to pray to a man-faced God, kept his whip beneath my bed, set alarms for daybreak lashings, pressed white cotton to the flay, made flags of the blood soak, raised them from my window, called this worship, dreamt heaven a jury small as a county where nobody looked like me. Winged bailiffs plucked my cuffs to trap my cousin in a hot coal cage, called this roulette freedom, licking my raw wrists. Witch kill blew my tatters down, peeled me to the blackest jade, remothered me to the squad car blaze. Loot and shard, my siblings now, witch kill. Forgive me, I feared the devil's prison, misfaithed the sheriff in the sky. Why? Witch kill. Forgive me, family, I'm miscountryed, our swarming anthem of my only homeland. Heaven and hell are the same empire, half-slipped, gasping, clutching our hems, ungoverned by the lie. With fists and flames, we cleave. Thank you. Now let's talk. I would love to hear from some of you. Thanks for listening, y'all. My co-reader is coming back. Hey, y'all. I missed you. It was so lonely. I feel like we only have 5 minutes for questions.
May I start us off by asking a question?
Yeah.
Okay, because I feel you. We don't have a whole lot of time. I have so many questions. You've already, even just in some of your readings, answered some of them. I would love to hear you talk more about the different ways that one can be against heaven, the different ways of being against. I'm so interested in hearing more about that. But the question I really wanted to ask you was, you've been such an important editor of my work, and you're like one of the most incredible doulas for other people's work and other people's words. And I wanted to know how bringing your own words into the world is different from helping other people bring theirs into the world, because you're so incredible at both of them.
Oh, I can. When I'm writing my own stuff, I'm like, oh, I have no idea how to write a poem. I have no idea what I'm doing. Maybe I'll never write another poem again. It's all. I'm tapping into a type of wonder when I'm writing my own poems, and curiosity and beginner's mind always. Which is different from when I'm editing someone's work, because as a reader, I can, I have other people's words to play off of, and can anchor in my own embodied, like libidinal understanding of the work to be able to name, okay, what feels like it's resonating, where's the heat, to be in a responsive mode to someone feels a bit more grounding, whereas being in a generative mode for my own self, that's, I'm just in the air. And so that's a lot of grappling and beginner's mind always. But I feel like, being responsive to other people's work just requires me to kind of listen, not just with my ears, but with my whole body. What is the work doing? And that's an easeful place for me to start. The blank page, not so much.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And again, I don't have anything to add to this event because the book is gorgeous. Your generous sort of giving and listening simultaneously, the inquiry that I feel like inherently needs to happen if you're a poet. Like that's what separates us from the, observationists, the historians, the people who are picking up on things. There's a different register, a different tinny sort of antenna. And I feel like you are not afraid of the ways that those things collapse onto one another and maybe exist in confluence of being like, I register this in the body that is not separate from history, that is not separate from the contemporary. It's definitely not separate from the future. So you're trying to figure out how a way to coalesce all these worlds, but you don't really have to figure it out. It's just like tuning into where you're already witnessing. And so I very much thank you for that. And I thank you for putting all of these voices in conversation and community with one another, understanding that like, whether or not you want to name yourself as such, you are a futurist. You've already established that. That doesn't just break down to the way that you write poems, and present poems the way that you look for those spaces and those like tentacles of communication in other ways. And so thank you, and thank all of y'all. And that's all I have to say. I sit in a lot of gratitude for this space. So I'm so excited for your book, and congratulations again. I'm going to say it again many times forward. I know it feels strange, but like just take it because you deserve. Get your flowers. It's good.
I'll work on that. I've never been so nervous for reading. I was like, what's the difference this time? What could it be? Oh, right, yeah.
It's really nothing, but also like, you know,
like it's just Tuesday.
And also just like, you know, continue to do what you've been doing, which is investing into building community and bridging community in the ways that they make sense. So,
I saw you, Aricka, and to the audience, my secret agenda was to turn this into like a little Chicago poet posse. So I look forward to our first meeting next Tuesday, same time next week. Let's gather. We'll do Zoom instead of Crowdcast, yeah. Or maybe by the lake. I'm not sure where H is, but there is a question in the chat, and I don't know how much time we have, but I guess I could answer it until someone tells me it's time to go. What do you think, H? For the second part of Omatara's question about how rest factors into your process, I just want to answer that really quickly because I just wrote a long letter about rest to readers of the Rumpus because I feel like in our poetic practice and in our organizing practices, in our care practices for one another, whatever we're doing, there's always this sense of urgency, of course, because of the urgency of the times, but also I feel like we absorb this frenetic energy, and we're told that discipline requires breaking ourselves or working to the point of breaking ourselves over and over again. I feel like it's really valorized in a writing practice to just like push through every day, like to mechanize our practices, to use the same logic and apply that to art and making myself a machine for poetry, for any of these other like community spaces that I operate in. As soon as we begin to turn our bodies into machines, we are just using the same logics of what we're supposedly working against or trying to dismantle. So I am trying to learn how to rest and to honor what a flow actually looks like, what it means to have my cup full so that I can pour into others, and acknowledging that the work is will not be worse because of it. It will be coming from a more grounded place, a truer place, and it won't be replicating the same logics of systems we aren't trying to fuck with. So rest has changed everything for me, though I still struggle. I have an internalized capitalist who's like, you can only be valuable if you're laboring. So yeah, ask me tomorrow and it could be a different answer. That's where I am today.
Yeah, I wanted to give some space to E. Hughes if he wanted to say anything or add anything, ask Kemi anything. And then I have a question as well.
Yeah, I loved your reading. And one of the things that I'm still thinking about after is your discussion of portals at the beginning before you started reading. And I guess my question, and it might be a generative thing, and it might be something to think about in the conversation and continue like in various spaces, Kemi, but are we looking for a destination when we enter a portal? Are we going somewhere? Like, it's so interesting to think about two portals as exits of sorts from whatever sort of chaos this world is, what it's created, what it's become. And so I'm curious say more about that?
I love that question. The first thing that came to my mind, this idea that everything is static anyway, that we would need a portal for change to happen. The logics of our current world are based on this idea of inevitability. What we have here, it's inevitable. It's just it's the static thing, and we would have to do something like really transformative for it to go away. No, these are systems that are reproduced daily. All of our actions are reproducing them. And so I think about the concept of inevitability a lot, like who owns the future? who has convinced more people that the future looks like this, instead of it's really, we have no clue and it can be anything. And so when I think about the language of a portal, I guess it's not necessarily that we are like exiting, or that it is what is transforming, or it is the agent of change. Change is happening constantly, but a portal as an opportunity to maybe really kind of acknowledge that change and reach towards something completely different. The portal as, if we're conscious about opening portals or trying to create different type of portals. I think about the poem Black As, the idea that the harm that folks endured during this pandemic, and that the harm of anti-Blackness in our culture is not the whole of it. It is not just harm. The idea that these systems, these logics are actually interruptions. They're not like the original thinking, the original structures. They're interruptions of things that have happened. They begin and they can end. And so the idea of a portal as maybe just reimagining time in that way. We are moving out of the wound being the whole of things, or what feels really static and inevitable being the whole of things. And so I'm answering this question, thinking about it in real time because it's so juicy. But I don't think about it as looking for a destination, but allowing change to be conscious instead of really passive and replicating the logics of what already exists. So I hope that answers your question, but I'm going to chew on it a little longer because it was so juicy. But those are my first thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I love that response. I mean, it's sort of, it's sometimes I ask the question, how do we get outside of the thing? That sometimes in poetry, my own work, and I hear it in everyone's work tonight, is trying, how do we step outside of the thing and then survey it for something else, and then consider a different type of being, type of existence. So, yeah.
Thank you for that question.
Amazing question. I'm wondering, you read the double golden shovel in the book. There's more than one golden shovel, and you referenced to the Gwendolyn Brooks poem, To the Young Who Want to Die. I'm wondering, for you, and this can be for everyone too, how Chicago poetics have influenced your writing, or even just how living here has changed you. If you could just talk a little bit about the influence of Chicago on your writing and of your life, I'd love to hear that.
I love this question because my first, the honest, true response was like, oh, these seasons have me so fucked up that there's so much about seasons in this book. The Lake Michigan plays a huge role in this book. Plays a huge role. Much of the book came together here in Chicago, so it felt very influenced by by the city. And I don't mean to be flip when I say the season fucked me up, but when I think specifically, say this Gwendolyn Brooks poem, that poem is really important to me as a depressed Black queer person. There's a poem in the book that's an erasure of a news story about the steep rise in suicides in Black Chicagoans. I think there's a big focus on, Black death. It's made into a spectacle, and physical and material violence is what's focused on, and not necessarily the existential and emotional danger that Black people are in. And so people don't necessarily talk about the suicides in Chicago in the same way they talk about the homicides in Chicago, you know what I'm saying? And so that Gwendolyn Brooks poem is really important to me because, she's speaking directly to young folks who saying, there's no green that you can use on these graves, right? You are spring. And I think a lot about the metaphors of seasons and what it means to be of a place that cycles the way that Chicago does, that the Midwest does. I'm a Midwest kid, so you'd think I'd be used to it. But what it means for everything to kind of go barren and to be at a point of stillness, stillness in a culture where stillness is not allowed for the humans, but we still have to keep moving at the same pace, and what it means to I have a poem, You Must Believe in Spring, titled after the Bill Evans album, but what it means to honor that these cycles of death and revival are just the truth of life, and they don't just occur in the pseudo other of nature, because we are all a part of this cycle and this process. And so I'm not flip when I say the seasons really influence the poetry. They anchor me in the cycle of death and rebirth that feel really integral to Black life, to Black queer life, to Black queer poetics. And then also I've just connected with so many great poets in this city. And I think that even though spaces come and go, it's kind of transient. People are coming and going. They're always leaving a little bit of their sauce. Zan Phillips was here for a bit, and, I got to have some of their sauce. There's everyone is so generous with one another, even if they're flowing in and out. So that's the second way to answer that question. What about y'all?
I mean, I'll just quickly add, yes, all of that. Yes, all of that. And also, it's interesting being, I am not born in Chicago, but my mother was. My grandmother migrated here at the end of the Southern migration from Mississippi. There's a whole hub of Black and Indigenous camaraderie, resilience, and lineage and history that is not necessarily in the archives as heavily as they should be because of whatever notions, right? Or whatever lack of access, or whatever war that these imperial powers were contributing in and collaborating in to suss out and X out everybody else, right? But even within that, I can still track a name to a point. To a point, you know what I mean? And I know that comes from so many rich traditions that come up even in my poetics, even in the ways that, I read a lot of your poems, Kemi, and yes, they are prayer and they are ritual and they are healing, but it is also a part of tending to the record, tending to the lineage, tending to the archive, because we also understand that that is our work to do. We're bridging narratives, we're creating futures, but we're also having to tend to what has been erased and doing our best to contribute something to that somebody behind us can hopefully apprehend and say, oh, this is a part of my history too. And so I'm just yet again so incredibly grateful for this dialogue and the ways that we can hopefully contend with the histories that we have, absolutely, and then the histories that we have not yet to discover. We can do that as well. And I think that your work is a very fluid and people can call it what they want to, but I always call it like border walking between the worlds, the many worlds of like the physical world and the spiritual world. And that spiritual world is not the same for one demographic of a community as it is for the other. And I feel like you're constantly kind of like an interesting esoteric spaceship trying to like, okay, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. I feel this, I understand this, I see this, I hear this. And that's such a unlearned gift that when it is intuitive in that way, folks have to pay attention. And the fact that you can translate that into like a lyric language feels really urgent and important and very much needed right now. And so thank you for being brave enough to ask those questions and for asking other people around you to ask those questions as well. So, yeah.
Y'all are sweet to me. Thank you. Guess who's back?
Sorry. I actually wanted to answer this question. Chicago is my favorite city in the country. But one of the things I did when I first moved here is I walked a lot of the historical, walked where Muddy Waters lived, Mahalia Jackson, like Gwendolyn Brooks. I mean, I walked a lot, especially on the South Side. And one of the things that was really integral when I was compiling my first manuscript, because I was so deeply in the archive. Like I went to Stanford, I went to the Oakland libraries because I'm originally from California, I did all this stuff. But I think Chicago taught me how to allow a haunting in my poetics that I don't know if another city would have allowed me to. The city is haunted. And I say that in the best way. And I think I try to carry the ghosts with me in my poetics. And I think that's how it has shifted my poetry. I feel like I grew up as a poet here. My poetics grew up. They taught me in a lot of ways, the ancestors, the history, the archive, the gaps in the archive, how to interact with silence and how to make that silence a poetics.
Y'all are brilliant. Are there any other questions? Okay, do we end with just a dance break? Do we just... I don't know. What you think, Gage?
Yeah, I was wondering if Benji had any thoughts on that question, but if you don't, totally okay, totally good.
I can respond to that question. I didn't want to step on any other questions if they was coming.
Yeah, take us out.
But okay. Such an incredible question. And y'all's answers, I was over here like, the girls don't understand. The girls don't understand. Like y'all saying, okay. But for me, I'm half Black, half white. My mom is white and my dad is Black. And I grew up on the East Coast. And Chicago has changed me in so many different ways. But in a big way, it's actually changed because it's the first time that as a Black person from the US and sort of a great migration descended Black person, it was the first time that I was ever in the ethnic majority. Where I grew up, most of my Black friends were African immigrants. Most of my Black friends were Caribbean and Latin American immigrants. And so I grew up around a lot of Black immigrant folks, some of them the descendants of enslaved folks from other countries, and some of them not. And I didn't realize how much of a culture shock it was going to be to suddenly be in the majority. And that was in a lot of ways the biggest adjustment when I moved here. But I've learned so much about being Black, and I didn't think, like, I feel like that's part of the nature of Blackness. It's like constantly revealing itself. And just when you think you're like, oh yeah, I know what this part of my life or what this vein of my ancestry or what this piece of my identity means, it evolves in a way that you could have never predicted, and just like what it means to be Black has evolved. What my own definition of Blackness, what my own relationship to Blackness is, has changed so dramatically being in Chicago. And that haunting that E referred to, like, oh, I could have never articulated it that way, but that's exactly what it is. And I've experienced more Black death and more Black suffering and more Black tragedy in Chicago than I've ever experienced in any other place, which means that I've also seen more struggle and more resilience and more wisdom in terms of how you navigate that level of trauma and that level of death and that level of violence, and the ways that the lineages that Black folks from Chicago specifically are carrying. I've been so blessed even just to be privy to them. And that's really all I can say. Like, as someone who's not from here, it's been such a blessing to navigate. You know, the last 10 years have been so particularly traumatic for Black people in this world. And I think to navigate them alongside Black Chicagoans has been the greatest blessing that I could have ever asked for myself, asked my ancestors for. And we ain't even gonna get into abolition and poetics and all the other things that Black folks from Chicago have really instilled in me. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Thank you, Benji, for that beautiful answer. And thank all of you for the ways that you have impacted and shaped and changed Chicago art and Chicago poetry as well. I just want to acknowledge that, and I'm grateful for all of you being here. I'm so overjoyed to be able to celebrate Against Heaven. And again, Kemi will be at the bookstore, 5233 North Clark Street tomorrow, 5 o'clock, signing copies. You can also order copies online at womenandchildrenfirst.com to have it shipped to you if you're elsewhere and not in Chicago, and Kemi will sign those for you. Thank you all again so much. Feel free to share the recording around. It will be up immediately following the event. And thanks again, y'all. This was a great evening and event, and I appreciate you.
Thank you for all your work. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, H. Thank you, Kemi.
Yeah, thank you all, and congratulations, Kemi. It's a gorgeous collection, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was an honor.